Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Jordan Poyer, Zach Sealer, all speaking with the media on kickoff day for Dolphins 2024 training camp. What were the standouts? We're covering that here today on this episode of Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome back to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase on last-minute tickets to the lowest prices. Guaranteed terms do apply. We are off and running at Miami Dolphins training camp. This is our Wednesday show, first practice, first Mike McDaniel availability coming today. It is Tuesday afternoon with me recording because there's travel involved, right? So we heard from a lot of familiar faces and one new face on Tuesday. A lot of the leaders on this team, and they spoke from everything from personal goals to outlook of the team to new contracts, to teammates looking for new contracts and what the ramifications are of that. A lot of ground covered. And I thought the most interesting comment was from Tyreek Hill talking about what his quest has been since he's got here, the quest for 2,000 yards. Jordan Poyer said the quiet part out loud about the perception from his former team with the Dolphins in the past few years. We'll get to that as well. And then Jaylen Waddle and several of Miami's teammates talking about what they kind of expect from Tua Tagovailoa and how much to read into until you get today's news cycle with the first practice coming today. So I want to, courtesy the Miami Dolphins, they have the clips up on their YouTube channel. I wanted to spotlight this quote from Tyreek Hill about his individual goal for the 2024 season.
I will say for me, man, last year is last year. Obviously, it was great for me to come out and say, XYZ, I want to get 2K, you want to do this and that. That'll be great. You know, grand scenario, that'll be great. But I feel like at the same time, I have to understand that the position that I'm in and me being one of the leaders and just singling out, you know, an individual goal like that, like, because I had time to go look at it, talk about it with my family. And it's like, that's very selfish of me, you know? So here moving forward, individual goal I've been talking about this whole entire offseason with my teammates, with my family, is I would want us to, win a playoff game. I would love that. You know, we're going to start with that. Then moving forward, like continuing to build on that, you know, we're going to move to the Super Bowl. So it's one step at a time. Like if I'm able to, you know, help this team, you know, do something special as a team goal, I would definitely count that as like an individual goal as my own. And that'll feel good. That'll be something that I could live with for the rest of my life. So
good for Tyreek. The 2K quest the past two seasons, if that is indeed kind of the focus of it, is on hold. And if it happens, it happens. That's great. I think Tyreek is a very likely candidate to lead the league in receiving yards again. He is a hallmark and featured piece of the offense. But you saw down the stretch, and you saw with what the Dolphins did this offseason, their focus on personnel becoming a more well-rounded team. That probably means being a 45% first read target share is not going to be in the cards if the Dolphins are going to be the best version of themselves as a football team. And I think there's an understanding with Odell Beckham coming in. You know, some targets in some places are going to have to be compromised. And Jonnu Smith, maybe he is a little bit more of an opportunistic player as compared to somebody you choose to feature. But for the focus to instead be not 2,000 yards, but for the focus to be team-oriented, postseason success, getting back to the postseason, achieving our team goals, I think that's great perspective for Tyreek, especially when you consider Um, he's looking for a contract adjustment, and he came out and said, I don't know that whether that's going to happen or not. I told Drew Rosenhaus I'd like one, but the other thing that I thought was funny from Tyreek's press availability was he explicitly said the thing that he told Drew Rosenhaus is don't get me traded. The last time we did this, we got traded to Miami. He reiterated he wants to be in Miami. So for him to, have it be reported that he's looking for a contract adjustment and to know that that's his frame of mind, but he's coming into training camp acknowledging, I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. I can't imagine anything with Miami is going to happen until there's some finality on the Tua Tagovailoa contract situation. And that lingers as we get into first practice today. There's, again, teammates talked about that. We'll get into that as well. But for Tyreek to say, look, 2K, if it happens, great. But let's put the focus on achieving the team goals, and the rest will settle itself if we do get the team goals. And I think that's a great place for Miami to be. And Tyreek saying all the right things with his first media availability. And you love hearing him come out and reiterate that he doesn't want to get traded. This is where he wants to be. And the focus is not on the statistics. The focus is on the Dolphins having their postseason success, getting that monkey off their back. So I thought that was really prominent because that has been such a big piece of Tyreek's presence in Miami his first 2 years. And he made a run for it. If he didn't get hurt and miss the Jets game and be on a little bit of a pitch count towards the end of the season, well, maybe he really would have got it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think everybody would settle for Tyreek having 1,500 yards or 1,400 yards and Miami winning 11-plus games, having a home playoff game, winning that game, and making a deep postseason run versus Tyreek getting 2,000 yards in an isolation. So Jordan Poyer, the new member of the team who spoke yesterday, and anytime Jordan Poyer kind of talks, you get some really interesting perspectives of his point of view on Miami from the other side of the fence. And he kind of dished on that a little bit. We're going to get into that next year on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Going to the game's not supposed to be stressful, right? And we're getting ready for football season to be back. We're in the full swing of baseball season. And if you want to go to the game, get your tickets through Gametime, the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier than before. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with their all-in pricing, there's no surprises when you put the tickets into your cart and then go to checkout. You know exactly what you're signing yourself up for. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today for last-minute tickets with the lowest price, guaranteed. Jordan Poyer, former Western New York safety, was asked quite a bit about meshing with his teammates and now that he's here. And one of the things that he was asked was what he hopes to kind of do to leave his mark on this team with the experience that he's had as a veteran player. He said he feels great, said he feels like he's closer to 100% than he was at this time last year, which is great to know. He was asked about 3 safety sets. Again, you can watch the whole thing on the Miami Dolphins YouTube channel. But the quote that stood out to me was how his availability ended because it was very enlightening around the perception of the Dolphins team from somebody who had to, the past several seasons, get ready to play the Dolphins teams of the past few years. Here's Jordan Poyer.
I think just sharing the experience, like I said, playing against this team over the past few years, you kind of, you get a sense of, okay, if you get on top of this team, they might fold. And there's some teams that are, I'm just being honest, so what is that what is it that happens in those moments to where, like, okay, we get hit in the mouth? You know, what happens in those moments where, like, hey, we good, let's bounce back, we're good. The game, it's a 60-minute game, it's a long game. So, you know, I've been in games where I've been up 24 points and end up losing. I've been in games and we've been down 21 points and end up winning. So it's just continuing to just play the game. The game is going to come down to the last series, the last play, so just keep playing. Don't get stuck into that play that you didn't make, or don't get stuck into X, Y, or Z of the past. You know, let's just keep playing, keep staying together. That's the biggest thing, too, is being able to stay together as a team. You know, because this is a team game. You know, it's not just one guy. You know, it's everybody. So being able to stick together through those adverse moments, through those ups, through those downs, and just staying on that line all the way through the season.
Pretty honest assessment from Jordan Poyer on the perception of Miami as a team that if you get on top of, there's not the level of consistency that you would want. And I appreciate that level of honesty from Jordan Poyer because I think the only way you would address an elephant in the room like that is to be open and acknowledge it. Now, there are instances over the past several seasons of Miami coming back from down in football games. You think about, you know, late in the first game of the season last year against the Chargers. You think about the response against Dallas, but you know, those were not games that you really fall behind in. I think Baltimore in 2022 is kind of the hallmark game of the McDaniel era of climbing back from a deficit, right? You're down 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and you come back and win. Like, it's a hard game to forget, but the overall perspective of Miami, especially when they've played Buffalo, is if they fall behind in games, they press. I think you look at the first game last year in Buffalo, and Miami's offense had a lot of success early in that game. The defense could not stop a nosebleed, and that led to some mistakes on the offensive side of the ball. Then it snowballs. McDaniel starts getting more aggressive to try to score on possessions, and then you're turning the ball over and setting the opposing team up on short fields, and you continue to not get stops. Kind of the Baltimore and Buffalo game last year followed that same script, where I think if Miami followed a little bit more of a conventional wisdom from a coaching perspective when the game gets away from you, they probably don't lose by the magnitude of points that they did in both of those games. But then are you really trying to win the game? So I guess some of those 2 games in particular stand out with how much the defense struggled in the first half of those games and how that snowballed. And then the defense continues to make mistakes and the offense makes more mistakes for pressing to try and make up for the defense. So I think that's a really interesting perspective from Poyer, having lived that in the first game last year. And there's been other instances. You think about the game when Tua went out in 2021. And it was kind of close at halftime, but they never really got anything going offensively and never really made it a game. If Miami's able to stay close and be in-game battles with a team, I think their track record has some nice wins on it. But for games in which they are behind multiple scores early, everybody remembers 6 touchdowns against Baltimore, but how many of those instances have happened and materialized? And how many games have you played against Buffalo where you're behind by 2 possessions and it snowballs on you? So to know that that's how that game was perceived from the other side of the fence, it's a very sobering reality, but it's a necessary thing to come out and kind of openly acknowledge and talk about, because that's how you address it. I think you consider Jordan Poyer and Calais Campbell on that side of the ball in particular, and that veteran presence, and Jalen Ramsey this past year, who only played half the season, and having him back in, that experience from those players is really valuable. And there's, of course, the benefit of that experience, but the long-term outlook of not necessarily having stability at those spots, because how long is Jordan Poyer going to play for you? How long is Calais Campbell going to play for you? They're on 1-year deals, right? Like, so having that experience impressed upon what is ultimately going to be the young nucleus of the team as it matures, it's kind of the cost of doing what the Dolphins did in 2019, where they tore the whole thing down and had such a young nucleus of a team. They're kind of back in the balance of that. especially the nucleus of the team. I think that's the biggest difference still when you look at where Miami's at now. And you could say, yeah, they got veterans on one-year deals. They got some older players. But you reflect back to before this brain trust in 2019 took over, and it was like your nucleus of your team was older players who didn't have the deep postseason success. So the nucleus of Miami's team is still young and can still benefit from the experience that wisdom of older players can provide. And Jordan Poyer hoping to do that in his individual role as a newfound leader in the Dolphins secondary is an addition that I think we all hope pays dividends for this Dolphins team. We also heard from Jaylen Waddle. We heard from Tyreek Hill. We heard from Raheem Mostert. We heard from just about everybody in regards to Tua Tagovailoa and his ongoing contract negotiation. I took the clip from Jaylen Waddle, so we'll hear what Jaylen Waddle had to say. Tyreek Hill was a little bit more optimistic. They're all optimistic, but Tyreek Hill was very emphatic with what he believes is going to happen. We're going to cover that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience are not just the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. With eBay Motors, you have everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guarantee Fit available only to U.S. customers. Tyreek came out and said, I think Tua is going to practice. And let me tell you why. He's a super competitive person. He won't necessarily tell you that himself, but Tyreek Hill thinks he's going to practice. Everybody was asked about their interactions with Tua as he reports to training camp amidst the contract negotiation. And everybody said, yeah, it's kind of status quo. Tua had some teammates over on, Monday night at his house before report date. Everybody says it's kind of status quo with Tua. Here's what Jaylen Waddle had to say when he was asked about Tua and where he thinks things ultimately end up standing out.
You get concerned that it might be a distraction the longer the contract talks are going on. He's an emotional guy. Is that a fear that maybe it becomes an even bigger thing than it is right now?
Nah. Tua one of them guys that really loves the game, really likes being with us out there, so I don't think it's going to be a distraction.
That's the consensus theme is they've downplayed it. Whether or not Tua actually participates in practice or he holds in, to what degree he practices, we're going to find out today from the media reports. And then there's potentially public practices starting on Sunday that are really going to blow the doors off this thing if it gets to that point. Now, if he ends up practicing, I think that is ultimately a good sign as far as good faith on both sides and making progress. I know Jeff Darlington from ESPN just said, was it yesterday, that he's felt like there's been some continued progress. He said about a month and a half ago, the Dolphins were of the frame of mind that they just weren't ready to make that level of investment, which makes me question, okay, like, first of all, they very clearly misgauged the market and the quarterback landscape, if that's the case. But you get the sense that this Dolphins organization, from a football operations standpoint, they like to it's not just an individual decision, right? So I think if they've realized this was the magnitude of investment that it's going to require, you look at all of your contracts, your upcoming contracts, you kind of have to come up with like a budgeted plan for what it looks like. And if the Dolphins a month and a half ago, which would be the beginning of like when we were at OTAs and minicamp, if the frame of mind then was we're not prepared to do it, but they're making progress towards doing it, you would think that the time that they've spent since has been looking at, here's where we're at as an organization. If this is what it's going to take, This is what it has to look like. This is the implications for the rest of the roster. Here's the dominoes that have to fall into place. These are the things we're going to try to negotiate to allow that to be possible for us if we get the contract done. And if all of that is going well, you'd like for that process to have started sooner. Apparently it didn't. But if that's what is taking place in Tua practices, you would be inclined to believe that that's a measure of good faith. Now, if he continues to hold out or hold in, I should say, then we shall see just how little of a distraction it can be based on how involved he is with practice. Does he practice but not do 11 on 11 like he did in OTAs and minicamp? Is it bigger than that? How long does it last? We shall see. But that's where things currently stand. I'm sure everybody is going to hear all about it through all the news and podcasts. We will have you covered as well here on Locked On Dolphins. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Training camp is here. We are underway. Make sure you stay tuned. My coverage moving forward will be from my hotel room, so the backdrop's going to be a little different, but we're boots on the ground. So it's an exciting place to be. Make sure you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day. Go Dolphins.